Welcome to Motivational Humanity. You are not alone.
There is a moment right before a party when some people quietly start building an exit. Not because they are sad, not because they are afraid, not because something is wrong with them, because a small, calm voice inside them has already made a decision. It says, I would rather be here alone with myself than out there performing for a room. For most of history, we had a word for that voice. We called it broken. We called it antisocial. We called it isolated. We called it a problem to be fixed, a wound to be healed, a phase to be grown out of. But somewhere in the last decade, a group of researchers sat down and asked a question nobody had seriously asked before. What if some people are not running from connection at all? What if they are simply quietly wired to prefer their own company? And what they found didn't just challenge decades of psychology. It rewrote the entire story of what it means to be whole. By the end of this, you are going to understand something about yourself or about someone you love that will completely change how you see every canceled plan, every quiet weekend, every closed door that was never a rejection at all. Stay with me, because the ending of this story is not what you expect. Let's start with the mistake. For most of the 20th century, psychology only had one lens for solitude, and that lens was deficiency. If you liked being alone, something in you had failed to develop properly. Maybe your childhood left you guarded. Maybe your nervous system was too fragile for the noise of other people. Maybe you simply hadn't found the right people yet, and once you did, you would naturally want to be around them all the time. This idea seeped into everything, into how we raise children, praising the ones who make friends easily and worrying quietly about the ones who don't, into how we build workplaces, rewarding the loud voice in the meeting and overlooking the person who does their best thinking in silence at their desk after everyone else has gone home, into how we build our entire language around love, where being single is treated as an unfinished sentence, waiting for someone else to arrive and complete it. And for a long time, nobody questioned it, because the loneliness researchers were the ones setting the terms. They studied people who were alone and suffering, and they concluded, understandably, that being alone causes suffering. But there was a hole in that logic, and it was a big one. They were only ever measuring people who did not want to be alone. Nobody had bothered to study the people who did. Then, researchers at the University at Buffalo did something almost embarrassingly simple. They stopped assuming solitude was always a wound and started asking people directly, do you avoid others because you fear them? Or do you simply prefer to be by yourself, independent of any fear at all? And when they separated those two groups, something remarkable happened. The second group, the ones who genuinely preferred solitude without fear driving them there, were not struggling. They were thriving. They gave this preference a name: unsociability. Not antisocial, which implies hostility toward others. Not avoidant, which implies fear of others. Just a calm, contented preference for one's own company, sitting quietly alongside a perfectly healthy capacity for connection when they wanted it. This single distinction cracked open a question that had been buried for decades. What if solitude was never the problem? What if we had simply never learned to tell the difference between a person hiding from the world and a person who had simply, peacefully chosen themselves? Think about how this plays out somewhere as ordinary as an office. There is almost always one person on a team who eats lunch alone, headphones in, door half closed, and for years that person gets quietly filed under difficult, or not a team player, or maybe going through something. Meanwhile, the version of them that shows up in the actual work, the strategy documents, the careful proofreading nobody else had the patience for, the one thoughtful comment in a meeting that reframes the whole discussion, gets treated as separate from their need for quiet instead of the direct result of it. We built entire performance review systems around visibility and vocal participation, and in doing so, we spent decades mistaking a person's operating style for a character flaw. But naming something is only the beginning. To really understand why some people find peace in an empty room while others find it unbearable, we have to go somewhere deeper. We have to go into the brain itself. Picture two people at the same party. Same music, same lighting, same room full of chatter and clinking glasses. One of them lights up. Their energy visibly rises with every new conversation, every laugh, every person who joins the circle. The other person smiles politely, and within 40 minutes, feels something in them beginning to dim, like a phone battery draining in the cold. For a long time, we called this a personality difference and left it there. But it is not just personality. It is chemistry. Specifically, it is dopamine, the brain's reward chemical, the one responsible for that little spark of pleasure when something exciting happens. Extroverts and people who crave solitude do not have different amounts of dopamine. They have different sensitivity to it. Imagine dopamine like the volume knob for stimulation. In a highly social brain, that knob is turned down low, so it takes a great deal of external noise, laughter, unpredictability, new faces to reach a satisfying level of stimulation. That is why extroverted people often chase bigger groups, louder parties, faster conversations. Their brain needs the volume high to register the reward. Now imagine a brain where that knob is already turned up. A brain that is more sensitive, more responsive to every stimulus it receives. For a person like this, a party is not neutral. It is loud in every sense of the word. One conversation lights up the same reward pathways that would take an extrovert 5 conversations to trigger. Which means, for a highly sensitive dopamine system, being surrounded by people for hours is not fun. It is overstimulation. It is a system that has already gotten what it needed and is now being asked to keep processing more and more and more with no way to turn the volume back down. This is why a solitude-loving person can leave a wonderful party, one where nothing went wrong, no one was unkind, nothing bad happened at all, and still feel completely wrung out. Their brain simply metabolizes social stimulation differently. It is not a flaw in their character. It is a different setting on the same machine. Think about spice tolerance for a moment, because it maps onto this almost perfectly. Someone with a high tolerance can eat the whole pepper and barely register it. Someone with a lower tolerance gets everything they need from a single flake, and anything past that stops being pleasurable and starts being painful. Nobody would look at the second person and say their tongue is broken. We would simply say they are sensitive, and we would adjust the meal accordingly. Yet when it comes to social stimulation, we rarely extend people that same basic courtesy. We hand everyone the same plate, the same expectation of a full evening out, the same assumption that more time with more people is always the better choice. And then we quietly judge the ones who tap out early as somehow lesser for needing less. But the story does not end at overstimulation. Because while one part of their brain is dialing down from too much input, another part is doing something remarkable. Researchers studying people who genuinely enjoy solitude have found heightened activity in the prefrontal cortex during alone time, the same region responsible for planning, self-reflection, and complex reasoning. In other words, while their nervous system quiets the outside noise, their inner world gets louder, more alive, more active than it ever was in the crowd. This is the part almost nobody tells you. Solitude is not the absence of stimulation. For a certain kind of mind, it is where the real stimulation begins. History is full of quiet proof of this, if you know where to look. Some of the most significant creative and intellectual breakthroughs of the last few centuries did not happen in crowded rooms. They happened in isolation, on purpose. A great deal of groundbreaking scientific insight has been traced back to long, solitary walks and periods of near total withdrawal from the world. Entire essays have been written defending a person's basic right to a room of their own, a space with a locked door where thought could finally take its full shape without interruption. Some celebrated writers have gone so far as to rent a separate room purely to write in solitude, even while owning a perfectly comfortable home full of people who loved them. That is not eccentricity. That is a mind that has learned, through trial and error, exactly what conditions it needs in order to do its best work, and has stopped apologizing for asking for them. Now, here is where the story gets uncomfortable, because it forces us to ask a harder question about ourselves. Just because a mind is built for solitude does not automatically mean every hour spent alone is healthy. There is a second layer underneath this preference, and if you skip it, you will misdiagnose yourself completely. Picture two women. Both spend most of their weekends alone. Both cancel plans more often than they keep them. From the outside, their lives look identical, but their internal experience could not be further apart. The first woman closes her front door on a Friday evening and feels something settle in her chest, a kind of exhale. She spends the evening reading, journaling, cooking a meal slowly, calling her sister just to hear her voice, not out of obligation, but because she wants to. On Monday, she walks into work, rested, clear-headed, present. Her solitude filled her up. The second woman closes her door for a completely different reason. Somewhere along the way, connection became associated with risk. Maybe she was criticized for being too much as a child. Maybe a friendship ended in betrayal that she never fully processed. Maybe she learned, early and painfully, that needing people is what gets you hurt. So she stopped needing them. Her solitude does not fill her up. It walls her in. It is not chosen. It is defended. This is the exact distinction the psychologist Abraham Maslow was pointing at decades before any of this research existed. He said healthy solitude comes from a place of abundance, not scarcity. A person choosing solitude from abundance knows, deep down, that connection is available to them. They are not alone because people are dangerous. They are alone because, for now, themselves is where they most want to be. A person retreating into solitude from scarcity is doing something entirely different. They are not choosing peace. They are avoiding pain. And the tragedy is that, from the outside, using our old language of introvert and extrovert, these two women look exactly the same. This is where boundaries get confused with walls, and it is worth slowing down on, because the two get mistaken for each other constantly. A boundary says, I am available to you, but on terms that protect my peace. A wall says, no one gets in, because getting in has always ended badly. A boundary can flex. It can open the door wider for someone who has earned trust over time. A wall does not know how to do that. It was built for one purpose only, to keep everyone out equally, the safe and the dangerous alike, because sorting between them started to feel like too much work or too much risk for a nervous system that had already been burned once too often. If you find yourself unable to remember the last time you let someone new get close, that is worth noticing. Not with judgment, but with curiosity. Somewhere along the way, a boundary may have quietly hardened into a wall, and walls, unlike boundaries, do not actually protect you. They just slowly, comfortably isolate you. So how do you actually tell the difference in your own life? Not by counting how many hours you spend alone, but by asking yourself one honest question. Why do I like being alone? If your answer involves words like recharge, create, think, breathe, that is the language of abundance. That is unsociability in its healthiest form. But if your answer involves words like safer, easier, less painful, quieter than the alternative of getting hurt again, that is not necessarily wrong, and it does not make you broken. But it is worth sitting with. It is worth a conversation with someone you trust, because that kind of solitude is asking to be gently examined, not simply celebrated. The people who have done this work, who have separated their preference from their protection, discover something the rest of the world is still catching up to. And it has to do with a myth we have been telling ourselves about love for generations. Think about the language we use for relationships. My other half, my better half, you complete me. It sounds romantic, but underneath it is a quiet, damaging assumption that a single human being is not whole, that we are all walking around as broken fragments, desperately searching for the one matching piece that will finally make us whole again. People who have built a genuine, chosen relationship with solitude look at that story and reject it, not out of arrogance, but out of hard-won self-knowledge. They have sat with themselves long enough to know they are not a fragment waiting to be completed. They are a whole set already. And here's the part that surprises people most. This is not a life spent isolated from others. Researcher Bella DePaulo, who has spent decades studying people who live single by choice, found something that flips the old narrative on its head. Single people, and people who embrace solitude generally, often build stronger, wider networks of friends, family, and community than people who are coupled. They are not clinging to one person to meet every emotional need they have. They are spreading their connection across many relationships, choosing each one deliberately, rather than depending on any single person to be their everything. This is the piece almost nobody talks about. The quality of your alone time does not just affect you when you are alone. It changes who shows up when you are finally around other people. Someone who has spent real time replenishing themselves in solitude walks into a room differently than someone running on empty, desperate for someone else to fill the tank. The rested version of you listens better, argues less defensively, loves without keeping score. Solitude, done well, is not the opposite of connection. It is the preparation for it. Picture a woman coming home after a long, demanding week, the kind where every hour was spent giving something to somebody else. If she has no relationship with solitude at all, she walks straight from that depletion into her next relationship, whether that is a partner, a friend, or her own children, and she brings the empty tank with her. She snaps faster than she means to. She takes things personally that were never personal. She shows up needing to be filled rather than able to give. Now picture the same woman, but this time she has built in even 1 hour of real solitude before stepping back into connection. That hour is not selfish. It is not an indulgence she has to justify. It is the difference between showing up as her depleted, reactive self and showing up as the version of herself that people actually want to be around. The relationship does not suffer because she took the hour. It survives because she did. If all of this feels foreign to you, if the idea of treating alone time as sacred instead of suspicious feels almost impossible in the culture you grew up in, there is a reason for that. And it lives on the other side of the world. In Japan, there is a word, Hitori, which simply means being alone, and it carries none of the shame our culture attaches to it. It is not just tolerated. It is designed for. Restaurants build private booths for solo diners, so no one eating alone has to feel like they are missing a companion. Movie theaters offer individual seating, angled just for one, so watching a film by yourself feels intentional rather than pitiable. There are entire karaoke establishments built around private, soundproof booths where a person can sing their heart out to an audience of exactly one and walk away having had a genuinely joyful night out, alone. Now compare that to the reflex many of us grew up with in the West, where eating a meal by yourself in public can still trigger a small, involuntary flush of self-consciousness, where the question, "Why are you sitting alone?" carries an unspoken accusation, as if solitude in public is a confession that something has gone wrong in your life. We built an entire culture around the assumption that being seen alone means being seen as unwanted. Japan quietly built the opposite assumption, and in doing so, gave millions of people permission to simply exist with themselves without apology. That permission is exactly what so many of us have been missing. Not a new personality trait to diagnose ourselves with, but a simple, overdue permission slip. You are allowed to like your own company. Your nervous system is not malfunctioning. Your dopamine system did not skip a setting. Your prefrontal cortex did not forget how to have fun. You are simply built to find restoration in a different place than the crowd finds it, and that place happens to be quiet. The world, especially right now, in an age where everyone is expected to be constantly reachable, constantly responsive, constantly performing availability, desperately needs people who know how to sit still with themselves. People who can think without needing 11 other voices to think alongside them. People who understand the difference between connection, which fills you, and codependency, which drains you while pretending to fill you. But that permission comes with one honest responsibility, the same one we touched on earlier. And it is worth repeating because it is easy to forget once the relief of feeling understood sets in. Preference and protection can look identical from the outside, and only you can tell them apart from the inside. So check in with yourself honestly, and do it often. Can you reach out to someone when you actually want to? Or has that muscle quietly atrophied? Do you have at least 1 or 2 people who genuinely know you, not just people who orbit you? When you choose an evening alone, does it feel like a door opening or a door slamming shut? The healthiest relationship you can have with solitude is one where it remains, always a choice you are free to walk away from, not a room you have locked yourself inside of. The next time someone raises an eyebrow at your canceled plans or asks, again, why you would rather stay home with a book than stand in a crowded room making small talk, you now have an answer that goes far deeper than I just don't feel like it. You could talk about dopamine sensitivity and a prefrontal cortex that comes alive in silence. You could talk about Hitori and private karaoke booths built for an audience of one, and a growing body of research proving that solitude is not social failure at all. Often, it is the opposite. It is social intelligence, quietly at work, choosing connection deliberately instead of compulsively. Or you could skip the explanation entirely, look them in the eye, and simply say, because I like myself. That tends to end the conversation rather quickly. And maybe that is the whole point. Not that solitude makes you superior, and not that connection is something to avoid, but that somewhere between the old, tired story of the broken loner and the equally tired story that everyone secretly wants to be surrounded, there is a truer, quieter story. One where being whole was never about who is standing next to you. It was about who you become when no one is standing there at all.